and then strip it of the jargon and make it understandable for the public. And I think he's very successful at this, and I think it's been an enormous service to the community in Salt Lake City and the state of Utah.
That call from Stockholm reinforced what colleagues already knew. Mario Capecchi's work developing a genetic mechanism in mice that allows researchers to study mutations that cause disease was more than worthy of the big prize. Diabetes, cystic fibrosis, heart and neuropsychiatric disorders, to name a few. And a big villain, cancer.
He's been following the lab for many, many years. I mean, when you win a Nobel Prize, it's not for something you've done in, that day. It's for something that you've accomplished that's affected medicine over many years of work. And the work that he described previously is actually the basis for the Nobel Prize.
The most memorable story is an anniversary story we did on Mount St. Helens. We flew up to the location to do some follow-up research after the eruption. But there was a photographer with me at the time, Bob Greenwell. There were the two of us in this crater. It was dead silent. There were no birds. There was no wildlife. The plug that had sealed off the volcano was still steaming, and you just watched that plug. And the plug actually, where the steam was coming out, little rocks would keep rolling off of the plug. And it was an experience I will never forget, the most memorable of all experiences. And then we got on the chopper and we flew out of there.
Here he's been, we made him the science reporter because of his passion for earthquakes. And then health was added on, so a health and science reporter. And he's probably recognized as much by a lot of people as this health and science expert as some of the doctors and scientists he's reported on, because he's been doing it for so long and knows so much about it. But the truth matter is he's also a practical joker.
Some of the consulting firms, television has consulting firms, and they come in and they tell you how to do things and change things. In the early days of my career, that was one of the comments they had with me is, don't be so serious on camera. And so I did try to lighten up, and I actually, it's somewhat of an irony because I am really a cut up off camera. This is called a human override. I can't do this. Take it away, computer.
Very much unlike the kind of money that we spend here on very sophisticated electronic cable to do remote stand-ups.
When the camera turns on and I'm dealing with the story itself, I do tend to become a little serious. And I think that's because I was brought up in the old school of journalism, the old canons of journalism, where you were not to be a participant in the story, you were to be an observer and a reporter. And so if you're going to be an observer and a reporter, don't inject your personality so much. Peter weighs only 118 pounds right now because in between trying to control the tics and eat, by the time he's finished, he's lost his appetite. I still probably tend to lean on the serious side because most of the stories I did were pretty serious stories. But I would guess if you looked at all of my stories and saw some of the patients we interviewed and some of the lighthearted stories, you would see me smile and maybe even laugh. Not very often, though. Eyes is high. I can't see. What do you? This seems ridiculous. I'm going up and down with this egg. I mean, some of the courage patients that I've interviewed that wanted so much to participate in a clinical trial, not for their own benefit, but to help others down the road. And they didn't make it. They died. To me, I got choked up with those people.
This was the final chapter in the story that began in Utah on December 1st. Barney's wife, Uniloy, with the same poise she commanded through those 3.5 months of optimism and disappointment, walked proudly with her husband's casket and then listened to a mix of old friends and scientists she and her family had carefully selected for this final tribute.
You cannot be a good journalist if you're going to report on the lives of people and do it so other people can feel the same intensity that they feel. You cannot be a good journalist if you close off your emotions. You just cannot be. You can be objective, but you still have to retain those emotions.
I think the only thing he regrets in his reporting career for the past 40 years is that the big earthquake hasn't happened yet. And because Ed wanted to be there to cover that story. And maybe he will yet, let's hope not. I'm grateful that Ed hasn't had his wish to cover that big earthquake. But he has done so much to inform us and the public about earthquakes and protections and what we should do. That, yeah, earthquakes and Ed Yeates are synonymous in my mind.
Thank you. I don't know where this speech is that Craig picked up here, but it's probably better than what I have to say. Where is it, Craig? Did it have my name on? My thanks and appreciation to the Utah Broadcasters Association and to some very talented students in the Department of Communication who put these presentations together. I think they deserve a hand. Brittany, who was my student, was the student liaison who interviewed me, that you saw in the video. She asked me before we went on camera, she said, do you still feel like a pro? I said, no, I feel like a dinosaur. And I think when you get to be this age, I mean, I go back to when we were shooting on a Bell & Howell DR70 camera that had little 100 reel, 60 millimeter film reels. 3 minutes worth of film you could shoot in that camera. It had a fixed turret with 3 fixed lenses on it. You had a light meter you had to go out and get your light reading. And reporters carried that in a little bag. It looked like sort of a miniature violin case that had the camera and all of the film. So I go back to that era when we were into film, and editing required the old-fashioned editing, the splicer, where you would splice the film. Photographers used an Auricon sound camera that had an optical soundtrack on it that you would have to cut very, very carefully. And so I remember that era, and now here we are shooting video on a little card, a little digital card that's about the size of a postage stamp. And that's how far the span has come. So that's why I feel like a dinosaur. So when you get to be my age, you tread carefully, trying to avoid the tar pit, you know, getting trapped in that, or even worse, getting hit by that meteorite that is targeted just specifically for you when you reach that golden age. So to say the least, at this age, I'm trying to be careful. I said this at my retirement, and let me just sort of repeat it here again. I always view news, television news, as a whole bunch of short films that are real drama, real people, real events, but they're like little films, little film stories. And you've got so many people involved in this, from editors to photographers who don't get enough credit in this business, who sometimes visually can tell a story without even having to put the words in there. They just visually can show it. And so my kudos to all of the photographers and the editors that I've worked with over all these years who take what you write and they put it visually on the air so it really looks good. And they make you look good. But so you look at hundreds and hundreds of these films that you've made over all the years. And so when you get to the end of your career, it's the closing credits that count. You're rolling all the closing credits like you do on a film, and it's all the people you worked with, reporters. If I start trying to name people, I'm going to forget some, and that's why I hesitate to start singling out people here. But you saw them, some of them here on the video. But outstanding journalists that you work with over all the years who give you input, so that you learn from them as well as you work with them. And again, all of the people in this mix of television that get a show and put it on the air, they are in these closing credits when you retire. Those are the ones that you want to sort of pay homage to. I feel like I really can't outdo Craig or Rod in a sense of humor. I've always sort of regretted the fact that in my 45 years or so in this business that I haven't had more of a sense of humor in the stories that I tell. I will tell you that I have gotten very close to shedding a few tears for some people that were participants in stories that I did. And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with showing that kind of emotion on camera, or especially to have a really good sense of humor. I really admire people who can do that. Let me just relate one quick story if I can. There are a lot of things that happen off camera that you never see. I remember Bob Greenwell, an outstanding photographer at KSL, very creative, worked with for many years. He was the photographer that we went right down into the crater at Mount St. Helens. But we went up to State Line Dam when they were still building the dam. So it was under construction. They were gradually filling it full of water. And we were trying to do a story on the geology of the dam, the fact that they were building this thing to be earthquake safe. Why would I ever pick on a story about earthquakes or seismic safety? But as we got up to the edge of the dam, of course, it's just barely filled with water. I mean, it's just still low with water. Bob wanted to walk down and get into the water to get some of these very creative shots. And we had, at that time, that was a 1-inch tape deck. Well, that's what we were using. You would sling over the shoulder. It was like a very, very heavy suitcase that you would literally carry, and had an umbilical cord that would go from the tape deck to the camera, which was a huge camera in this case. So I put on the tape deck. We went down into the water. Bob's got the camera, and he's moving ahead. And as he gets down in the water, he's so creative that he forgets that I'm tied to the umbilical cord to this camera. I'm over here with this great big heavy tape deck. And so I went up on that story with a suit and tie and Oxfords, and I'm walking down into this water with this tape deck, and I'm trying to yell to Bob to say, Bob, hold up, I'm not going to be able to walk down into this water. But he was so absorbed in what he was doing, or he knew what he was doing. And I think that may be the real case. So I kept walking down into the water. Well, this is a brand new dam, and the mud underneath is solid clay. And it's just like quicksand. And so as I stepped into this, my foot went down into this mud, and when I tried to pull it out, it pulled the Oxfords off, okay? And the Oxfords just sunk down into the clay. There's no way I can retrieve them at this point. And so now I'm trying to step with my socks on one foot and a shoe on the other, trying to keep the one shoe afoot, and it goes into the mud, and I lose that Oxford. And now I'm in the water. I don't have any shoes anymore. And I realize all of a sudden I'm getting very angry at this point, because I can't get Bob's attention to tell him to stop walking out into the water. And I happen to turn and see the BLM guy, who was our escort, and he has his back turned to me because he was laughing so hard that he didn't want to face me. And I could just see his body shaking with laughter. And that made me even more angry, you know. He's saying, this poor little reporter from Salt Lake City, and he's stuck in the mud out there in the lake. And Bob, I cannot get him to turn around, and he's doing the same thing. Mr. Greenwell is laughing so hard that he's afraid to turn around because he knows how angry I am. So there were lots of things like that occurred off camera that you never see on camera. That's my little sense of humor. John Hollenhorst, who is here, knows what it's like to be stuck in the mud. And if John ever reaches this point, which I'm sure he will, he's such an outstanding journalist, he may be able to relate to you what happened on that story, which is a classic blooper film. If it hasn't made the national circuit yet, that's only because, John, you've destroyed the video. No, I say thank you to everybody and to all of my colleagues who are here. These people that I've worked with over all these years, producers, editors, photographers, journalists, I sat next to John most of the time at KSL. Our desks were always together, and we would always chit-chat back and forth. John is as fascinated and as well able to report sciences as anybody, and he now does that extremely well on KSL. But we would sit there and chit-chat all the time. And I miss that. I miss the camaraderie that is on a regular basis. I do it sort of on a part-time now, but I miss that a lot. So again, thank you everybody for this recognition. It is certainly an honor. I'm glad I got it before I got stuck in the tar pits or had that meteorite strike me down. So thank you very much.
Well, that concludes the formal portion of this program, but before we adjourn to a reception that's out and across the way, which I'll explain in a moment, I want to invite Michelle back up here, who has a couple special awards. Michelle?
Okay, we're going to do this in alphabetical order. We're gonna honor Tim Larson and Dale Zabriskie. As Bob said, we first got the word that Tim is retiring, and we said, gosh, it's too late for us to get him in the Hall of Fame, but you're definitely on the list, and we're sorry we weren't able to do that. But Tim, come on up. This is because Tim is Mr. Hall of Fame. He likes to just kind of be in the shadow, but he's a great guy, and I've known him since I was at the U 20 some odd years ago, and I'm sure I got an A in your class, right, Tim? Yeah. Thank you. Just say a couple words.
Thank you so much. I have no sense of humor. I couldn't upstage even the other people who were up here, obviously. So thank you so much.
Unlike Dale, I liked when things were alphabetical because it gave me a chance to finish my homework as they were going through. And so, Dale Zabriskie, come on up. Dale likes to point out that while I've been named president, he is not retiring, he is not going anywhere, and I more than anybody is grateful for that. So say a few words, please.
Well, it's been a good ride. Utah broadcasters have been good to us. What some of you know is that Michelle and I operate a public relations firm called Zabriskie & Associates, and for 26 years, Utah Broadcast has been one of our clients of our PR firm, and so we handle it that way. But we manage the whole association, and for a long time served as the leader, and now happy to pass this along. But if you look at that chart of the people who have been inducted into the Hall of Fame, you see that there's that gap between, well, it goes pretty steady to 90, and then 92, and then 97, and then 2000, and then from 2001, it's every year. And that's because of our association here with the communications department at the U. And that's been a great, great benefit to us and to the Hall of Fame. And we look forward to further inductions. And Tim, you are on the list.
Well, again, I want to say thank you all for coming today and being part of this. It's always wonderful to bring this collection of people together. And of course, I look forward to welcoming you again next year. Now, before we break to go out to the reception, I would simply like one more time to recognize the students and also the members of the Murdoch family who contributed to the production of these outstanding videos, because this is the talent that we celebrate today as well. Please, the students, please stand. all the students that are here. Their resumes will be available at the door. I also want to take a moment to thank Professor Dr. Paul Rose, his technical staff that have been here that make this work so seamlessly and make it look effortless. And they've been with us throughout. We are so grateful to our technical staff in the Department of Communication for making us look so good. So we thank them as well. And now, if we exit out the way you came in, go over into the main atrium area, turn left, go down the hall to what's called the Jewel Box, which is a reception area. We have that area available, and then we can spill out to the patio to enjoy ourselves and have the good company of others. So again, thank you for coming.